Yo, what's going on? This is James, and we are going to be going to check out Quest Gym, all right? Now, Quest Gym has been around since 1980s. So you can imagine, Quest or Sherman Ledford, they've been around the state of Georgia and strength and conditioning and sports for the last 50-ish or so years. So today we are going to check out kind of like a little hidden gym or gem, GEM, in Georgia that I don't think a lot of people know about or think about. Now, just right off the bat, this is going to be a gym that I practically started off. And honestly, if you've been in Georgia and you never checked out Quest Gym, you're kind of missing out on probably one of the most historical gyms that you got, okay? All right, everybody, we are here. So, like usual, let's take a look at the gym, all right? All right, so as you notice, this is the parking lot, all right? Now, I'm not a big fan of a gym that doesn't have a parking lot, all right? Now, Steel Society has a slightly smaller parking lot, but at least they got a parking lot, all right? And some of the gyms that you're gonna notice that I'm gonna check out in the future has like maybe 2 parking lots, 2 parking spots. So let's go ahead and take a look. There we go, baby. Okay, I used to love coming into Quest. I used to love reading this article right here. And you got Caleb Williams and Doc Holloway on there, right? So those two are my OGs. And never in my life will I ever be better than these guys, right? These guys pushed me to be who I am. They kind of passed the torch down to me. And I'm just waiting for the right person to swing by before I pass the torch on to them. All right, it don't really matter over here, so let's keep going. All right, check it out. Junior World Team coaches when Sherman used to be the head coach. He's running around, gathering all the shirts here. This is kind of like a little historical gym. Now, Sherman used to have a bunch of other plaques and shirts and things like that that used to hang around, but I guess, again, he's slowly changing the gym into like a health and wellness center. But technically, this is kind of how the gym looks like when you first walk in, all right? So they have like a hyperbaric chamber, and I believe they're trying to put like a little cryotherapy thing here as well. Sherman used to run his own powerlifting competition. And honestly, if you don't know, some of the greatest lifters of our time and powerlifting history would have never happened if not for this man, all right? And we're currently at the gym that he created, okay? So again, if you don't know who Sherman Ledford is, and you are a powerlifter in Georgia, or just a powerlifter in general, I'd like you to know who this man is, all right? Team USA head coach for over 15 years, and he's probably trained some of y'all's favorite lifters, okay? See Jen Thompson there? See all these world champions that he's kind of coached over the years? And this is the gym, or the mind behind the man that practically is one of the staples of Georgia powerlifting, okay? All right, first thing you're gonna notice, guys, is Sherman has a bunch of cardio machines here, okay? And then every single bodybuilding machine that we're gonna kind of go over has like a very specific reason for why it's here, okay? Now, most people, when they buy machines, they just kind of buy a machine just to buy a machine. But Sherman specifically kind of points out or holds on to old school machines, new machines that really hit the body a certain way. And we'll kind of just go over some of the ones that I like. If you're a power lifter, we are entering the power room, all right? So generally, back in the day when we used to compete a lot, we would come train here, and you would have 2 competition racks, 2 squat stands. So in case you're like an Olympic weightlifter or general trainer, you know, you don't really need the powerlifting competition racks. And then you have the power rack over here and 2 deadlift platforms, okay? Now, Sherman definitely has a deadlift bar and a Texas powerlifting bar and a few other 29 and 28.5 millimeter bars in the power room. But if you were needing like a monolift or a squat bar, this is not the gym to be at, all right? Now, Quest generally started off as USAPL, you know, back in the day, USPF type stuff into the IPF. So this gym is going to be more catered to that gym culture. If you're more into like squat bars and multiply lifting to a degree, there's not going to be a lot of equipment or training items for you here, okay? So kind of just to give you a little lowdown of the power room here. All right, you guys see this? This is a metal foam roller that's about 100 pounds, okay? So if you need a lot of pressure on your legs, all right? Make sure it doesn't fall because you can break my leg. But this is like next level foam roller here, right guys? Just a huge chunk of metal that's about 100 pounds and it hits the muscles, okay? Just a couple of things that you guys will see at old school gyms that you guys won't really see everywhere else, okay? It has AC, but they opt for a lot of fans, okay? So it's not that the gym is super hot. It will have some air circulation everywhere, you know, but ideally I prefer a gym with AC, okay? All right here we have a little front squat machine that I really like, okay? So technically your feet's going to be in there and then you kind of just load up here, and I'm probably going to use this later, all right? So you guys will kind of get to see a little bit of that. No, but for the most part, you have your kettlebell station there. You know, you can take a step outside here, right? And then you got your gigantic tires to flip. You have your kettlebells, medicine balls, okay? Rack, rack, and rack. Okay, check it out. You got your bands there. And then I like this little rig here too. You know, just more spaces to squat, more places to lift if you really wanted to lift. These are the dumbbells. Alrighty. Some plyo boxes right there. You have 2 benches there. And then fairly heavy dumbbells, all right? Now check it out. This is something that most gyms probably won't have. We have like a little rolling thunder here, right? You can kind of hook it up to this and create like a grip exercise because it's gonna swing like this. You can also use like a pinch block, or you have the old school wrestling forearm, you know, roll. So, you know, just some very specific items that a lot of gyms won't have that focus specifically on your grip. And if people don't really know, once you hit 50 or 60 years old, grip becomes a life expectancy condition. So if you have weak grip, right, there's a good chance that your life expectancy is going to be less, okay? So train your grip. Check it out. Here's another rack here. Another power rack. All right. A GHD, a dip, and then you got a unique reverse hyper here. And then you have an old school, you know, GHD back in the day when it was kind of created. It's kind of nice because you see how there's a little angle here. So you're gonna have like a different type of lockout when your legs are straight. and it kind of just hits your glutes a little bit better. It kind of gives it like a pre-stretch before the exercise. And then, you know, you already see that Sherman has like this little pull-up rig, so you can do as many pull-ups or whatever as you want, kind of like separating the gym in half between like some of the upper body machines and free weights over there into the lower body side of the gym. Okay, let's go over some of these machines that's a little unique. Okay, so this is I'm a big fan of this machine right here, because technically, right, so let's go ahead and just run through a quick session. So this is what a leg press machine normally is like, right? So let's go ahead and unflip that. And you see how like you have one leg press, and then if you wanted to, you can swap it around. So you see this little hitch here, right? Bam. Just like that. And now I can train my leg press individually, okay? Check it out. So again, one of the nice things about Sherman Lefford, or the man behind the gym, is that this is how you kind of see the way that he set up his gym. He has a very specific, you know, gym equipment for every muscle group. And for the most part, it just hits your body different. It hits your body more specific. It hits your body more towards the way that you train. And I just like that it has options, you know. Now, for the most part, you know, these machines right here are just going to be very basic machines. You know, for triceps and cables and stuff like that, you know, you have to mess with the angles yourself. But this particular machine right here, so you notice how like the seat is at an angle this way, but then the chair and the feet is still kind of at a straight, okay? So the thing that I like about this row machine is that the seat's not straight. And when the seat is angled this way, it's almost like your chest is caved this way a little bit, and you kind of hit your lats at a certain angle, you know. And this is very unique. You know, I don't see a lot of row machines that are like this, but if you ever came to Quest and you hit this machine, you know, you're gonna notice that it hits your rows or your back just a different way, you know. And look, this is not necessarily like a cable, it's more like a rope, you know. So I kind of like the way this feels. You won't find this machine or this bent over, this pull over machine or whatever anywhere else. I kind of like this too. You know, a lot of people, they don't train their obliques, and you have a machine here that can kind of practically help you train your obliques. Okay, so pop this off, right, and then practically you're just doing an ab crunch, but to the side like that. Okay, really cool machine. But yeah, for the rest of these machines, you know, this is a side lateral machine, but these are just basic, you know, dip machine, and then 2 shoulder machines, another chest press machine, and then you have like this little conjunction right here. That's a preacher curl and a tricep extension. But for the most part, you know, fly machine, you have just about all the bodybuilding machines, all the extra kettlebells and toys, all the extra rigs and platforms and dumbbells over there. You know, you kind of have like a little TRX machine over there where you can kind of do like performance-based stuff. You have 2 stretchers over there too that I don't think a lot of people really get into, you know. But at the chiropractor's office, you'll see these, okay? You'll see these 2 little stretch machines right here. And these 2 stretch machines right here is just nice to kind of really stretch your hip and things like that if you really need it. But yeah, for the most part, this is Quest, okay? And this is kind of where I work sometimes when I'm here, all right? But you see all of the powerlifting magazines and all the powerlifting stuff that they have, you know, just to kind of promote the sport a little bit. And here, a little bit that Sherman does on the side here is that he runs a flag shop and a nutrition store. So he'll sell like weightlifting stuff, weightlifting shoes, powerlifting belts, supplements. You know, my favorite supplement here is Hardcore. It just kind of helps with your sleep and your recovery. But for the most part, you have a hydration station there as well. And you know, if you need any merch, chalk, supplements, Inzer wrist wraps, things like that. That stuff for you, okay? But that is pretty much the gym. For the most part, those are the general things that everybody kind of takes a look at. And now we're gonna have our workout, and then from there, we'll see what's up. All right, peace out. Hey everybody, I just got done training at Quest Gym, and I'm just gonna kind of go over, some of the things that I really like about Quest and some of the things that they can kind of work a little bit better on, okay? All right, so the first thing that I really like about Quest is that there's a parking lot. Now, I know some people probably don't think a lot about that, but I've been to a couple of gyms where they all share like a little parking lot, and you might only have like 2 or 3 spaces to park, okay? So I really appreciate like a gym that has at least, I don't know, 15 places to park. That kind of makes it a little bit nicer for me. Number 2 that I really like about Quest is that Quest is kind of like a historical gym. You have a lot of access to probably the best coach, if not one of the best coaches in Georgia. A guy that has 15 plus years of experience on the USA team as the head coach. And honestly, like if you just want to learn more, like if you're a power lifter or any sort of lifter and you live in Georgia and you haven't gone to take a look at Quest or check it out or pick Sherman Leffer's brain, I just feel like that's something that lifters or people really, really miss out on, as, they get involved into the powerlifting sport. Okay. So, another thing too, that I guess I really like about Quest is that it's kind of like a really hardcore gym. So overall, like if you're not a hardcore type person, or like if you don't like to train in the dark, if you don't like that peace and quiet, there's a good chance that Quest might not be for you. You might be more towards like the commercial gym type people, where you like a lot of people to be there, and things like that. Another cool thing about Quest is that it's a supplement company, it's a powerlifting equipment company, it's a flag company, and it's a personal training and wellness area. So there's just like 5-6 different things that are really, really important when it comes to like services as a lifter, as for health, that you can benefit. And then again, you got a guy that's been in the fitness industry for like 40 plus years. He can really guide you on what kind of equipment, what kind of supplements, what kind of prep, what kind of nutrition, and things like that you can really utilize in your life or as an athlete. And you can't really get that anywhere else outside of Quest. Now, there are a couple of coaches or lifters that live in Georgia that's been around for 20, 30, 40 something years as well. But I would just argue that there's just something about Sherman's personality or something about his eye that is really, really helpful at a powerlifting meet that even the best lifters in the world could benefit from. And your favorite powerlifter probably has learned something or known something or been influenced by something that Sherman has done in the past. Okay. Another thing that I like about Quest is the specific equipment. Every piece of equipment is not from like Anytime Fitness or from Lifetime Fitness or, the basic machines that you find off of Facebook or off of like Dick's Sporting Goods and things like that. Sherman kind of has like a lot of history, and he handpicks some of the machines that he has in his gym, specifically kind of like the ab machine, that row machine, some of the leg press machine. Some of these things are very specific that allows you multiple options that you wouldn't have everywhere else. Most people just try to get like a leg press machine or a shoulder press machine and never truly think about all of the little nuances of the machine itself. So I think that part of the gym, like if you're a gym junkie like me, you might really appreciate, like when you see a Dynabody machine, or when you see like, one of these really, really Magnus, like old school powerlifting and bodybuilding machines that you just don't see anymore because everybody's like up to date, and I would argue that the old school machines are always better, because the old school machines were a person that didn't have or the pulley or machine to build the muscle. Nowadays, you got the template, and then you have a bunch of people that say stuff like, all right, now I'm going to improve on all of these things, and all of those improvements aren't always going to be the best when it comes to building muscle or trying to get the job done, because now the design sounds good, but it's not practical. And I think old school bodybuilding machines, especially if you're picky like Sherman, makes it nice. Some nice things that you get to see at the gym. Quest is also, it has a shower, it has a locker, all the little stuff. Now, what can Quest do better that can really up their number on my scale? Okay. But just before we begin, let's just say right now, Quest is at 8 out of 10 for gym for me. And if Quest could, one, maybe be just a little bit cleaner, because, there's like spider webs everywhere. There's a lot of dust around, some dead cockroaches and dead spiders and stuff like that. And then you kind of just know, like, maybe someone hasn't been here or someone hasn't cleaned the gym. For me, I can still train. I can care less about dead cockroaches or spider webs. But if you are a type of person where that part is important for you, then even though Quest is at an 8, maybe you might even knock that down a point or two for you. Again, I have some people that I work out with, and myself included, where I have a lot of sinus issues. So like all that dust stuff, I'm like constantly blowing my nose whenever I train at Quest. And you might not really think about it, but if you blow your nose like 15 times in an hour, that's almost like 15 minutes out of that hour that I'm no longer working out, and I'm just sitting here blowing my nose and trying to make sure I can breathe while I'm doing my sets. So, that's one of the things that I think could really, really improve Quest. Like, let's say get some sort of air purifier, and maybe just kind of get someone that can clean out all the spider webs and all the dust to make it a little bit cleaner. So someone like me or someone that has a bigger issue can really benefit from the gym and all the amazing things that the gym actually has. Okay. Now, another thing that might annoy you, especially if you're like a competitive powerlifter, is that Quest is very limited. Okay. So unless you're competing in, let's say, a USAPL meet, there's a good chance that Quest won't really have the specific equipment that you need anymore, because they're old school. They still have the equipment from back in the 1980s and 90s and early 2000s that people really competed with. But nowadays, people use like a Texas strength system, or maybe they might use a Eleiko. And Sherman or Quest Gym currently does not have those things. So if you're looking for those things like competition plates, current competition equipment, maybe if you're like a multiply lifter where you need a squat bar and or a monolift, these are not going to be things that you're going to have access to. So I would argue that those are some of the things that Quest is missing, that really hammers down from a perfect 10 down to like an 8, maybe even like a 7.5. And then maybe again for you, cleanliness and hygiene type stuff might be very important for you. So maybe that might knock you down a little bit. Or maybe you're like a die-hard competitor. So like if you don't have competition equipment or things like that, that might knock down the gym a little bit for you. But if you're just a guy that's just trying to get a workout in, you need a little bit of peace. You like that gritty darkness. You like to be in the mud while you're freaking training. Quest is where it's at. Okay. Now, some of the things that really cause me to not come to Quest a lot is obviously it's like an hour plus away from my house, especially during traffic. Sometimes I might have to drive an hour and a half, to come to Quest. And if I had a choice between an hour and a half to 25 to 30 minutes, I'm driving 25 to 30 minutes, especially if the 25 to 30 minute gym has AC, and Quest sometimes may or may not throw their AC on. Especially like today, it was super hot. So, the sweat and the blowing my nose and then having to take a shower really took about 30 minutes of that 2 hours that I had. Now, again, not complaining about it, but if we had a nitpick, it's a nitpick. But yeah, for the most part, I think Quest Gym is a solid gym, very historical. You have to train there at one point in your life if you're like a real powerlifter, in my mind. Okay. And then at the same time, it's very good resource for everything, like nutrition, athletics, a little bit of wellness, especially powerlifting. And all the best powerlifters that you've ever seen in Georgia and even some of your favorite lifters has been coached by Sherman Leffert before. So make sure that you guys don't lose out on this gem of a gym, and you go check it out every once in a while. Say hi to Sherman and introduce yourself and maybe learn something, But for the most part, that is my take on Quest.